15 years later, I walked into my childhood home to find my mother scrubbing toilets in the mansion I'd bought for her, while my daughter stood over her, dropping ashes from her cigarette onto my mother's gray hair, laughing with her friends that she was just the help. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply smiled. But before I tell you how I dismantled my own daughter's empire of cruelty, piece by piece, I need you to do something for me. Get comfortable and listen carefully. This is the story of how Victoria Chen rose from the ashes to reclaim her throne. The taxi driver, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "You sure this is the right address, ma'am?" she asked, slowing down in front of the towering glass and steel building. "This is the Chen Tower. Only millionaires live here, and you. Well, no offense, but you look like you've been through hell." She wasn't wrong. I wore a faded denim jacket I'd picked up from a secondhand store in Nevada, and my boots were scuffed from years of walking through desert construction sites. 15 years in the American Southwest. 15 years I'd carved out of my life so my family back here in the city could live like royalty. My hands were calloused, my face marked by the relentless sun, and my once black hair was now streaked with silver. To this woman, I was just another tired soul who'd taken a wrong turn. "This is it," I replied, my voice hoarse from weeks of traveling in silence. I handed her the fare, adding a $100 tip that made her eyes widen in surprise, and stepped onto the smooth marble plaza. The air here was different. Clean. It smelled of expensive coffee and designer perfume. So unlike the dust and diesel fumes I'd grown accustomed to. To lungs that had breathed the dry heat of construction zones, this city air felt cold, artificial. Like breathing inside a refrigerator. The Chen Tower. My gift. My sacrifice. The building stretched 40 stories into the sky, all gleaming glass and chrome, with a penthouse suite at the very top. I remembered it differently, just an empty lot with a faded for sale sign when I'd signed the papers 15 years ago. Now, every window glowed with warm light, and even from the street, I could hear the pulse of music and laughter drifting down from the rooftop terrace. A celebration. A party. I hadn't announced my return. I wanted to see their faces when I walked through that door. I'd imagined my mother, Mei Chen, dropping her knitting and rushing to embrace me, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. I'd pictured my daughter, Isabella, now a grown woman of 28, throwing her arms around me and whispering, "Mom, you're finally home. You can rest now." I walked across the plaza, my footsteps echoing against the stone, marking the final yards of my exile. I carried only a small leather bag. Everything I'd earned, the tens of millions of dollars that could buy half this city, sat in accounts they knew about and in trusts they didn't know existed yet. I was returning not as the Iron Phoenix, the name the construction crews had given me, but simply as Mom. As Victoria. The lobby doors slid open automatically, releasing a wave of perfumed air and techno music that felt completely out of place in what should have been a family home. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse. My heart beat steady and calm. I had learned to control my fear years ago. Any moment of panic on a construction site could cost lives during a structural collapse. The elevator rose smoothly, silently. 40 floors in less than a minute. The doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer. The space was flooded with light from an enormous crystal chandelier that must have cost more than most people's houses. The walls were covered in abstract art, pieces I recognized as investments I'd suggested they make. Young people in designer clothes crowded the open-plan living room, holding champagne flutes, their laughter sharp and careless. The air reeked of expensive alcohol, grilled seafood, and entitlement. No one noticed me at first. I stood in the elevator doorway, a small figure in faded denim against the backdrop of their glittering excess. Then my gaze dropped. To the right of the entrance, where a beautiful oriental rug should have been, something was crumpled on the cold marble floor. A heap of gray fabric that looked like old cleaning rags, giving off a sour smell of sweat and ammonia. I thought at first it was a pile of laundry someone had forgotten, but then the heap shifted. A thin arm appeared, wrapped in pale, papery skin, and then I saw the face. Partially hidden by matted gray-black hair, but I recognized that gentle slope of the nose, those high cheekbones that mirrored my own. Mei Chen, my mother, the woman I had left as the lady of this penthouse. She was lying right there on the floor, curled up on the hard marble like a discarded coat. She wore what looked like an old hospital gown, stained and torn, and her feet were bare, the soles blackened with dirt. Something crystallized inside my chest, not pain, but ice. The kind of cold that comes before a killing frost, when every living thing knows to hide because death is walking. At that moment, a young woman strode in from the terrace, laughing loudly, tall and slim in a silver cocktail dress that probably cost more than my mother's monthly medication. She held a lit cigarette in one hand and a martini in the other. Designer heels clicked against the marble. It was Isabella, my daughter. She wasn't looking down. Or rather, she was looking, but she didn't see a person there. She walked directly toward my mother, and I waited for her to step around her, or perhaps bend down to help her up, or at least snap at the staff for allowing this. Instead, Isabella stopped directly over my mother's curled form. She took a long drag from her cigarette, tapped it casually, and a shower of gray ash fell onto my mother's silver hair. The old woman flinched but didn't move away. She made a small whimpering sound, soft and obedient, like a beaten dog. "Oh my God, Isabella." A young man in a designer suit giggled, clutching his drink. "You're going to set the old bat on fire." Isabella laughed, a sound that was smooth, careless, delighted. "Don't worry about it," she announced loudly, projecting her voice across the penthouse for all the guests to hear. She ground out her cigarette on the marble floor, inches from my mother's face. "This is just our live-in housekeeper. She's a bit touched in the head, you know. We keep her around out of charity. She likes sleeping on the floor. Makes her feel useful, right, Granny?" My mother said nothing, just curled tighter into herself. The guests laughed nervously. Some looked away in discomfort. One woman pulled out her phone to record. In that moment, the mother in me died. The woman who had wired money every month for 15 years, who had saved every school photo Isabella sent, who had kept a box of her baby clothes in storage, thinking one day she'd share them with grandchildren. She vanished like smoke. In her place stood the woman the construction foreman had learned to fear. The Iron Phoenix had returned. I didn't scream. I didn't rush forward with my fists raised. Hysterics are for the weak and the unprepared. I simply took one step out of the elevator into the light, calmly and deliberately. The room began to quiet. First, the people nearest to the entrance fell silent. They didn't just see an older woman in a cheap jacket. They saw my eyes, the eyes I'd used to stare down crooked inspectors and negotiate with mob-connected developers. The silence spread through the penthouse like ice water poured into warm champagne. Isabella, who had her back to me, felt the change. She turned slowly, her practiced smile still frozen on her face, but confusion already flickering in her eyes. But she wasn't the first to react. In the center of the room, holding a tumbler of whiskey, stood a silver-haired man in an expensive Italian suit. Marcus Reeves, the city's most powerful real estate attorney, a man whose bankruptcy I had once prevented with a single phone call, and the only person in this room who knew who I really was. His eyes went wide. His face drained of all color, turning gray as old newspaper. The crystal glass slipped from his fingers and exploded on the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot. Whiskey splashed across a white sofa, but no one moved. Marcus Reeves, the man who'd made billionaires weep in court, bent at the waist in a deep, almost servile bow. "Victoria Chun," he whispered into the frozen silence. "We were told you had died in an accident." Every eye in the room turned to me. I stood motionless, looking only at my daughter. I saw fear flash across Isabella's face, but it was immediately replaced by something else. Something slick and calculating, like oil spreading across water. Let me know, and I'll write the next section where Isabella tries to manipulate the situation and Victoria begins to understand the full scope of the betrayal. Isabella straightened up, smoothing the front of her silver dress. She didn't rush to me. She didn't fall to her knees or cry out in joy. Instead, she burst into a loud, theatrical laugh, pointing a manicured finger at me. "Oh my God!" she exclaimed, her voice dripping with exaggerated relief. "Everyone look, my poor mother really did make it back." But, she paused dramatically, her smile never reaching her eyes. "The doctors warned me this might happen. Mom, sweetheart, you look so confused. Do you even know where you are?" She stepped toward me, and in her eyes I read a clear message. Play along, or everyone suffers. "She's been having episodes," Isabella announced to the stunned crowd, her voice thick with false sympathy. "Early onset dementia. The doctors in Nevada said she might wander off, forget who people are. It's why I've been managing everything, the accounts, the properties, everything. Someone has to protect her from herself." She reached for my elbow, her fingers closing around my arm with surprising force. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into my skin through the denim. "Come on, Mom. Let's get you to your room. You must be exhausted from your journey." I didn't resist. Not yet. I let her grip my arm, let her play the role of the devoted daughter helping her frail, confused mother. But I was watching everything. The nervous glances between guests. Marcus Reeves, standing frozen with his mouth slightly open, his eyes darting between me and Isabella. The way my mother remained curled on the floor, not daring to look up, as if hope itself had been beaten out of her. And I was listening to the words Isabella wasn't saying, the story she was so desperately trying to sell. "I'm sorry, everyone," Isabella called over her shoulder as she steered me toward the hallway. "Family drama. You know how it is with aging parents. Please enjoy the party. The caterers will be bringing out the lobster course any minute." The crowd began to murmur, the spell breaking. Music started again, a little too loud. Someone laughed uncomfortably. Life was returning to the party, everyone eager to forget the awkward moment they'd just witnessed. Isabella pulled me into a bedroom at the end of a long hallway. Not the master suite I designed for myself all those years ago, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. No, this was a small guest room, barely furnished, with a single bed and curtains that blocked out all natural light. She shoved me inside and slammed the door behind us. The smile vanished from her face like ice melting in hot water. All that remained was cold, calculated fury. "Listen to me very carefully, Mother," she hissed, stepping close enough that I could smell the expensive perfume that couldn't quite mask the scent of cigarettes and alcohol. "You're dead. To everyone out there, you're either dead or crazy. I don't care which version you choose to be, but those are your only options." I remained silent, studying her. I searched that face for traces of the little girl who used to draw me pictures of our future house, who cried when I told her I had to leave for work. But I saw only a stranger, a cold, greedy stranger who'd learned to wear a daughter's face like a mask. "If you say one word," Isabella continued, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper, "if you try to talk to Marcus or anyone else at this party, if you so much as hint that you're lucid, I will throw that pathetic old woman out onto the street tonight. In nothing but that rag she's wearing. And believe me, Mother, at her age, in her condition, she won't last a week on the streets." She pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward me. On it was a photo of my mother, clearly taken recently, lying on what looked like a hospital gurney. Tubes ran from her arms. Her eyes were closed, her face sunken and pale. "She's sick," Isabella said flatly. "Heart condition. She needs medication every 6 hours, or she'll have another attack. The doctors give her 3 months at most, even with treatment. But without it," she snapped her fingers, "days, maybe hours. So here's how this works. You play the senile old lady. You stay quiet. You stay out of sight. And maybe, just maybe, I'll make sure Grandma gets her pills on time." My hands wanted to shake, but I didn't let them. Fear is an emotion, and emotions cloud judgment. I needed to think. I needed information. I made my shoulders slump. I let my eyes go unfocused and watery, the way I'd seen confusion settle over workers after heat stroke in the desert. I began to rock slightly, a tremor I'd observed in elderly patients at the medical clinic near the work sites. "Isabella," I mumbled, intentionally slurring the name. "Is that you, baby? When did you get so tall? I'm so tired. Where's my room? I want to rest." Isabella's shoulders relaxed. The tension in her jaw disappeared. She saw exactly what she wanted to see, a broken, confused old woman, no threat at all. "That's better," she said, her voice softening into mock sweetness. "You just stay here and rest, okay, Mom? I'll have someone bring you some food later. There's a bathroom through that door. Don't try to leave. The door locks from the outside for your own safety." She left, and I heard the unmistakable click of a deadbolt sliding into place. I was alone in the dim room, but I didn't lie down on the bed. I stood completely still and listened. I listened to the party continuing on the other side of the wall, to the clink of glasses raised in toasts to the hostess who had just imprisoned her own mother. To my daughter's laughter, bright and carefree, as if nothing had happened. Hours crawled by. Eventually, the music faded, car engines started in the parking garage below, and the penthouse settled into an uneasy silence. I walked to the door. The lock was electronic, a keypad system, probably biometric too. Modern and supposedly secure. But I'd spent 15 years on construction sites where every door, every lock, every security system had a weakness. The contractors always left back doors for maintenance. I examined the doorframe carefully, running my fingers along the edges. There, a small gap where the frame met the wall, just wide enough. I pulled a thin metal nail file from my jacket pocket, the kind I'd carried for 15 years for emergencies. 2 minutes of careful work, applying pressure in just the right spot, and I felt the mechanism give way. The lock disengaged with a soft beep. I eased the door open and slipped into the hallway. The penthouse was dark now, lit only by the city glow filtering through the massive windows. I could hear 2 sounds, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, and someone breathing, shallow and labored. I knew that sound. I'd heard it before, in the desert, when workers collapsed from heat exhaustion. I moved toward the entrance hall. The marble floor was cold beneath my boots. There, in the same spot where I'd first seen her, lay my mother. They hadn't even moved her. No blanket, no pillow, just the cold, hard floor. I knelt beside her. She was shaking, her breathing ragged and wet. I could feel the heat radiating from her skin. Fever, probably infection from lying on this filthy floor for who knew how long. I took off my jacket and draped it over her. Then I sat down beside her, right there on the marble, and leaned my back against the cold wall. I took her hand in mine. It was burning hot and rough, the skin cracked and dry. "I'm here, Mama," I whispered into the darkness. "I'm back, and I'm not leaving you again." Her eyes fluttered open, just for a moment. In that brief second, I saw recognition flash across her face. Her cracked lips moved, forming silent words, "Run. Danger. She'll kill you." "Sure," I soothed, stroking her burning forehead. "Nobody's killing anybody. Not anymore." I didn't sleep that night. I sat guard over my mother like a soldier watching the perimeter of a camp. I remembered the desert. I remembered the heat that could kill you in 3 hours without water. But this penthouse was colder than any desert night. The frost here didn't come from the weather. It came from the human heart. But I knew how to fight cold. You just needed the right kind of fire. Dawn arrived with pale gray light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city below was waking up, millions of people starting their day, completely unaware that in this tower of glass and steel, a war was beginning. The first person to enter the penthouse was a maid, young, maybe 25, with tired eyes and a nervous walk. She wasn't someone I recognized. When she saw me sitting on the floor next to my mother, she gasped and dropped her cleaning supplies. The bucket clanged against the marble, sounding like a fire alarm in the quiet morning. "Jesus Christ," she whispered, crossing herself. Following behind her was an older woman, the head housekeeper. I recognized her immediately. Linda. She'd worked here since I'd first purchased the penthouse. A young woman fresh from housekeeping school, eager and bright-eyed. Now her face was lined with deep wrinkles, and her eyes held the constant wariness of someone who'd learned that kindness was punishable. Linda froze when she saw me. I was sitting on the marble floor in my dusty clothes, next to the woman everyone called the crazy housekeeper. But I lifted my head and looked at her the way I used to look at her 15 years ago, when I'd given her instructions for managing the household. I didn't say hello. I didn't explain myself. I simply raised my chin slightly and used my eyes to point toward the kitchen. "Coffee. Here. 2 cups," I said quietly, but with the tone that brooked absolutely no argument. The young maid snickered, opening her mouth to say something about crazy people not getting coffee service. But Linda grabbed her arm sharply, yanking her back. Linda had gone pale, and I could see her hands trembling. She remembered that tone. She remembered who I was. "Right away, Mrs. Chun," Linda mumbled, and in her voice I heard not fear of Isabella, but old, deeply ingrained respect. 5 minutes later, she returned with a silver tray. On it sat a French press of coffee, 2 porcelain cups, 2 plates with scrambled eggs and toast, and a small crystal vase with a single white rose. Linda knelt to place the tray on the floor in front of us. Her hands shook so badly the cups rattled in their saucers. She set a cup of coffee before me, and as she did, she met my gaze. It was a silent plea, a question. What do I do? How do I help? She glanced quickly toward the hallway where Isabella's bedroom was, checking to see if the mistress of the house was awake yet. "Eat up, ladies," she said loudly, for any invisible listeners. "Fresh breakfast with real butter." But as she pulled her hand away from my cup, her fingers briefly pressed against my wrist, and I felt something small and papery slide beneath the saucer. Linda stood quickly and hurried back to the kitchen, pulling the young maid with her, never looking back. I waited until their footsteps faded completely. My mother was stirring now, waking slowly under the warmth of my jacket. I picked up the coffee cup. Beneath the saucer lay a folded piece of paper, torn from a notepad. I unfolded it with one hand. The handwriting was rushed, shaky, the letters barely legible. Don't drink anything Isabella gives you. There's something in it. Makes you foggy and weak. Only drink bottled water from the sealed cases in the pantry. She watches everything. Be careful. I slowly raised my eyes to the steaming plates of eggs. The smell was rich and buttery, but now it seemed like the smell of poison. I looked at my mother. She was reaching weakly for the plate, her eyes unfocused with hunger. I gently but firmly pulled her hand away. Not today, Mama, I said softly. We're fasting today. For clarity, the war had truly begun. And the first battle was being fought in the kitchen, where food was weaponized and loyalty was a currency more valuable than gold. I discreetly emptied the plates into a large potted palm tree near the entrance. The earth absorbed the food quickly, greedily, as if it too was hungry for truth. My mother watched with childlike confusion, but she didn't protest. The habit of obedience, beaten into her over years, was stronger than hunger. Mother, what is this circus you've created now? Isabella's voice cut through the morning quiet like a blade. She descended the floating staircase from the upper level, tying a silk robe around her waist. Behind her trailed a young man, mid-20s, expensive haircut, the kind of hollow eyes that come from too much money and too little purpose. He wore designer pajama pants and carried 2 mimosas. Babe, seriously? He drawled, looking at us with disgust. They're sitting on the floor like homeless people. This is getting embarrassing. What if someone posts this online? Quiet, Tyler, Isabella snapped, but she kissed his cheek, her eyes never leaving mine. Mother is just being eccentric. Old age, you know. It does terrible things to the mind. They walked past us toward the dining room. I helped my mother stand. Her legs trembled, barely able to support her weight, but she leaned into me with surprising trust. We shuffled slowly after them. The dining table looked like something from a luxury hotel. Fresh fruit arrangements, imported cheeses, smoked salmon, and pastries that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Isabella and Tyler sat at the head of the table in the designer chairs I'd picked out 15 years ago. We were directed to a small folding table that had been set up in the corner, near the kitchen door. On it sat a bowl of plain oatmeal and a pitcher of tap water. Sit, Isabella waved casually, spearing a piece of melon. Don't be shy. Special diet for you too. Doctor's orders. Easy on the digestion. I sat, keeping my face blank and compliant. My mother immediately reached for the oatmeal, her hands shaking with hunger. I let her take one small bite while I watched Isabella carefully. Now, in the bright morning light, I could see what the darkness had hidden last night. My mother's pupils were dilated far beyond normal, black pools that nearly swallowed the brown of her irises. Her skin had a grayish, waxy quality. Her movements were uncoordinated, jerky, like a marionette with tangled strings. This wasn't old age. This wasn't dementia. This was chemistry. Suddenly, my mother froze with the spoon halfway to her mouth. She stared at a spot on the wall where a large abstract painting hung, a Jackson Pollock reproduction I'd purchased as an investment. Her lips began to move, forming words that made no sense. The butterfly counts not months but moments, she whispered, barely audible. Tyler burst out laughing, nearly choking on his mimosa. Oh my God, listen to this. The old lady's speaking in riddles again. What is she, a fortune cookie? Isabella smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She does this. Random poetry. Children's rhymes. The doctors say it's neural misfiring. Sad, really. But I listened closely. I knew my mother. We'd grown up poor together, just the 2 of us after my father left. We'd developed our own language, our own codes for when we needed to hide things from social workers, from landlords, from anyone who might take what little we had. And has its time enough, my mother continued, her voice changing, becoming flat and mechanical, as if she were reading from a script. 3rd drawer from the top, the wooden box under the scarves, combination is your birthday backwards. She stopped as abruptly as she'd begun and went back to eating her oatmeal, as if nothing had happened. Isabella and Tyler hadn't noticed. They were too busy laughing at some private joke, completely absorbed in their own world of privilege and cruelty. I filed the information away. 3rd drawer. Wooden box. My birthday backwards. Isabella stood up, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. She walked over to our corner, and I could smell that expensive perfume again, mixed now with morning coffee and something else. Anxiety, perhaps poorly masked by confidence. "Mother," she said, and the word dripped with false affection. "We need to handle some paperwork today. Nothing major, just some formalities about your care and the trust fund management. You want me to be able to keep taking care of Grandma, don't you? She needs her medication, her doctor's appointments." She dropped a leather folder onto the table in front of me. I opened it slowly, pretending to struggle with the clasp. Inside were documents, dense with legal language, printed on expensive cream-colored paper. I scanned the text quickly. My years negotiating construction contracts had trained me to spot the dangerous clauses buried in fine print. This wasn't a simple power of attorney. This was a complete transfer of assets: the penthouse, the trust funds, the investment accounts, everything. And buried in Section 12, Paragraph C, was the clause that made my blood run cold. The grantor acknowledges sound mental capacity and voluntarily relinquishes all rights to residency in the properties listed herein, effective immediately upon signing. The grantor further agrees to relocate to a care facility chosen by the trustee within 72 hours of execution. Isabella handed me an expensive pen, platinum with her initials engraved on the side. "Just sign at the bottom, Mom. Don't overthink it. I know reading is hard for you now." I took the pen. My hand, the same hand that had signed multimillion-dollar contracts, that had held a sledgehammer to break ground on office buildings, began to tremble dramatically. I can't see the line," I mumbled, squinting at the page. "The words are all blurry." "Just make an X then," Isabella said, her patience clearly wearing thin. "Right there, see? Where my finger is." I raised the pen over the signature line. My hand shook harder, more violently. Then, as if I'd lost all control, my hand jerked sideways. The pen stabbed into the paper, and ink exploded across the page in a dark blue starburst. In my panic, to fix it, I dragged my hand across the document, smearing the ink into an illegible mess that covered the entire signature section. "Oh!" I gasped, pulling back as if I'd been burned. "I'm sorry, baby, I'm so sorry. My hands don't work right anymore. I ruined it." Isabella's face turned crimson. The veins in her neck stood out like cords. "You stupid old woman," she screamed, slamming her hand on the table so hard the oatmeal bowl jumped. "Do you know how much that document cost? How long the lawyers worked on it?" Tyler rushed over, grabbing Isabella's arm. "Babe, chill. She's senile. She doesn't know what she's doing. We'll just print another one." "Get her out of here," Isabella snarled at the hovering staff. "Both of them. Lock them in the guest room until I figure out what to do." Two security guards I didn't recognize, young, muscular, clearly hired for intimidation, moved toward us. But I stood slowly, helping my mother to her feet, and shuffled toward the hallway with exaggerated weakness. I needed them to keep underestimating me. As the guards herded us down the hallway, I caught Linda's eye. She was standing in the kitchen doorway, and she gave me the smallest nod. She understood. We were on the same side. The guards locked us in the same small bedroom. I heard the electronic lock beep and engage. But I'd already examined it last night. I knew its weakness. "Mama," I whispered, helping her onto the bed. "I need you to rest now. Can you do that for me?" She nodded, her eyes already closing. Whatever drugs they'd been giving her were still in her system, making her drowsy. But she'd been lucid enough this morning to give me the clue I needed. I waited until I heard the guard's footsteps fade down the hallway. Then I went to work on the lock again, this time with a small piece of wire I'd pulled from the bed's box spring. 3 minutes later, I was free. The penthouse was quiet. Isabella and Tyler had gone out. I'd heard them arguing about meeting someone named the developer at noon. The staff was busy with daily chores. I had perhaps an hour, maybe 2. I moved silently up the floating staircase to the upper level. This was the private floor, Isabella's bedroom suite, her office, her walk-in closet that was probably bigger than the apartment my mother and I had shared when I was growing up. I found her bedroom easily. The door was unlocked, arrogance, thinking she was completely in control. The room was pristine, decorated in whites and silvers, everything chosen for maximum Instagram appeal. But I wasn't interested in the aesthetics. 3rd drawer from the top. I found the dresser, a massive white lacquered piece that probably cost more than a car. I opened the 3rd drawer. Silk scarves, dozens of them, arranged by color. I pushed them aside carefully, and my fingers found wood. A box, maybe 8 inches square, made of dark mahogany with brass corners. I lifted it out. There was a combination lock on the front, 3 dials, numbers 0 through 9. My birthday backwards. I was born May 15th, 1968. Backwards. 8691510. No, wait. That was 7 digits. The lock only had 3. I thought harder. Just the date? 15 backwards, 5 to 1. Still only 2 digits. Then it clicked. She meant the full date in numerical form, month, day, year, but only the last 3. 151 from May 15th, 68 backwards. 151. I tried it. Nothing. I tried 516, the reverse of the month and day. Nothing. Then I thought about how my mother's mind would work, especially under the influence of drugs that scrambled her thoughts. My birthday, the day I was born. I tried 685, the last 2 digits of the year plus the month backwards. The lock clicked open. Inside the box was a collection of items that told a story more clearly than any confession could. A USB drive labeled backup, trust accounts. A small leather notebook with handwritten entries. A bottle of prescription medication, haloperidol, an antipsychotic, prescribed to my mother, but with dosage instructions that were clearly dangerous. Medical records with forged signatures. And at the very bottom, a stack of photographs. I pulled them out with shaking hands. They showed my mother in various states of distress, drugged, confused, being led around by Isabella like a puppet. But the worst photo was time-stamped from 3 months ago. My mother, clearly lucid and healthy, sitting at a table with Isabella. Between them was a document. My mother's face showed fear, and Isabella's showed cold satisfaction. The document was titled, Voluntary Admission to Psychiatric Care. My mother had never been sick with dementia. She'd been drugged into compliance. I heard footsteps on the stairs, someone coming up. I quickly shoved everything back into the box except the USB drive and the notebook, which I tucked into my jacket pocket. I closed the drawer and slipped behind the bedroom door just as it opened. Linda entered, carrying fresh towels. She saw me immediately and froze. For a long moment, we stared at each other. Then she deliberately turned her back, facing the empty hallway, blocking the view with her body. "You have maybe 10 minutes," she whispered without turning around. "Isabella just called. She's coming back early. She's suspicious." "Linda," I said quietly. "How long has this been going on?" 3 years, Linda replied, her voice thick with shame. "Ever since she got power of attorney by claiming your mother was incompetent. She's been systematically liquidating your assets. The trust funds, the investment properties, everything. She's drowning in debt, gambling mostly. She owes money to some very dangerous people. Why didn't you call the police?" Linda finally turned to face me. Tears streamed down her weathered face. "She has my daughter, Mrs. Chin. Not literally, but my daughter got caught with drugs. Isabella made the charges disappear, but she held it over me. If I talked, if I did anything, she'd make sure my daughter went to prison. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I walked to her and took her hands. "You're going to help me now. And when this is over, your daughter will be safe. I promise you that. What do you need? I need you to tell me everything. Who's helping Isabella? Who knows what's really happening?" Linda swallowed hard. "There's a doctor, Dr. Raymond Marsh. He's been providing the drugs, falsifying medical records. And there's a lawyer, Patrick Sullivan. He's been structuring all the transfers to look legitimate. They're meeting today at noon at Sullivan's office downtown. Isabella's trying to rush through the final asset transfer before I ruin everything. I finished for her." Linda nodded. "She's planning to have you committed, Mrs. Chin. Tomorrow. She has Dr. Marsh ready to testify that you're a danger to yourself and others. Once you're in psychiatric hold, she can finish the transfers without any interference." The pieces were falling into place. Isabella wasn't just cruel, she was methodical. She'd built an entire infrastructure of corruption around her theft. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated her mother. "Linda," I said, "I need you to do something for me. It's dangerous, and if Isabella finds out, she'll make your life hell. But it's the only way to save all of us." "Anything," Linda said without hesitation. I told her my plan. With each word, her eyes grew wider, but she never interrupted. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled, a real smile, fierce and determined. "It's about damn time someone put that girl in her place," she said. "Let's burn her empire down." I had exactly 4 hours before Isabella returned, and less than 24 before she tried to have me committed. For hours to gather evidence, build alliances, and turn the hunters into the hunted. I slipped back downstairs and returned to the locked bedroom where my mother slept. I sat on the edge of the bed and gently shook her awake. "Mama," I whispered, "I need you to stay strong for just a little longer. Can you do that?" Her eyes opened, clearer now than they'd been in days. The morning dose of drugs was wearing off. "Victoria," she whispered, and hearing her say my name with recognition made my chest tighten. "Is it really you?" "It's really me, Mama. And I'm going to fix everything. But I need to know, how much do you remember? About what Isabella did?" My mother's face crumpled. "Everything. I remember everything. She told me you were dead, Victoria. She showed me a fake death certificate. Said you died in a construction accident in Nevada. I was so broken, so lost. And then she started giving me medicine to help me cope. But it didn't help. It made everything foggy. Made me forget what day it was, forget my own name sometimes." Her thin hand gripped mine with surprising strength. "She's been stealing from us. Taking everything. I tried to stop her, tried to hide things, but she caught me. She increased the drugs, made me look crazy so no one would believe me. And then she made me sleep on the floor, like an animal, to remind me what happens when I disobey. Did anyone else know? Did anyone try to help you?" Linda tried. She would sneak me real food sometimes, water without the drugs. But Isabella threatened her daughter. And there was one other person, Marcus Reeves. He came by 6 months ago, asking questions. He said something didn't seem right about the financial transfers. But Isabella told him I was senile and dangerous, and she had Dr. Marsh there to back her up. Marcus left, but he didn't look convinced. Marcus Reeves, the lawyer who'd recognized me last night. The man who'd bowed in respect, who'd looked horrified when Isabella tried to explain me away. He was my way in. He was the crack in Isabella's armor. I kissed my mother's forehead. "Rest now. Linda will bring you real food and clean water. Don't eat or drink anything else. I'll be back soon." I found Linda in the laundry room, folding towels with mechanical precision. When she saw me, she quickly closed the door behind us. "I need to get out of the building without being seen," I told her. "Is there a service exit?" "Basement level, through the loading dock. But the security cameras. Can you loop the footage? Even for just 10 minutes. Linda bit her lip. "The security office is near the lobby. I know the guard on duty, Jerry. He's not a bad person. He takes breaks at 11:30, smokes in the alley. If I could get his access card." "Can you?" She nodded slowly. "He has a thing for me. Keeps asking me to dinner. If I distract him, say yes this time, I could probably lift it for a few minutes." "Do it. I need to be out of here by 11:45. Linda glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 11:20. "You'd better change your clothes. You look like a homeless person. Isabella's closet. She has hundreds of outfits. Take something professional." "I'm not wearing my daughter's clothes," I said automatically. "This isn't about pride, Mrs. Chin. This is about war. And in war, you use every weapon you have. If you show up at Marcus Reeves' office looking like you just crawled out of a desert, he'll have you escorted out. But if you show up looking like the businesswoman you used to be, looking like money, he'll listen." She was right. I hated it, but she was right. 10 minutes later, I stood in Isabella's massive walk-in closet, surrounded by thousands of dollars worth of designer clothes that had been purchased with stolen money. I chose carefully. A tailored black pantsuit by Carolina Herrera, simple but expensive. Black leather heels that were only slightly too big. A silk blouse in deep emerald. I pulled my silver hair back into a sleek bun and found a pair of designer sunglasses. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the tired construction worker who'd arrived yesterday. She was Victoria Chun, the Iron Phoenix, the woman who'd built a fortune from nothing. I was back. At 11:35, Linda texted me, "Coast clear. Basement in 5. I made my way down the service stairs, moving quickly but quietly. The basement was dim and smelled of concrete and cleaning supplies. The loading dock door stood open, bright daylight streaming in. I stepped out into an alley behind the building. The city noise hit me, traffic, voices, the distant wail of sirens. Freedom. I hailed a taxi on the main street. "Downtown," I told the driver. "Reeves and Associates law firm. And I'm in a hurry." The driver, an older man with kind eyes, glanced at me in the mirror. "Important meeting?" "You could say that. I'm about to ruin someone's life." He laughed. "Well, in that case, let's make sure you're on time." 20 minutes later, I stood in front of a glass tower in the financial district. Reeves and Associates occupied floors 30 through 35. I rode the elevator up, my heart steady and calm. This was it. The first move in taking back my life. The reception area was all polished marble and modern art. A young woman sat behind a curved desk, her expression professionally polite. "Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, removing my sunglasses and looking her directly in the eye. "But Mr. Reeves will want to see me. Tell him Victoria Chen is here. He'll understand." The receptionist's professional smile faltered. I'm sorry, but Mr. Reeves is in a meeting right now. If you'd like to schedule." "Tell him," I interrupted, my voice quiet but carrying steel, "that the woman he bowed to last night is standing in his lobby. Tell him I know about the trust fund transfers. And tell him he has 5 minutes to see me, or I walk out that door and take my evidence directly to the district attorney's office." The receptionist's face went pale. She picked up her phone with trembling hands. "Mr. Reeves? I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's a Victoria Chen here to see you. She says it's urgent." I couldn't hear his response, but I saw the receptionist's eyes widen. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." She hung up and looked at me with new respect and fear. "Floor 35. Private elevator to the left. Mr. Reeves will meet you at the top." The private elevator was lined with mirrors. I checked my reflection one last time. Confidence. Authority. These were my weapons now. The doors opened directly into a penthouse office suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. And standing by those windows, his back to me, was Marcus Reeves. "Close the door," he said without turning around. I did. The lock clicked with a sound like a gunshot. Marcus slowly turned to face me. He looked older than he had last night, the lines in his face deeper, his eyes haunted. "Victoria Chen," he said softly. "I thought you were dead. That's what my daughter wanted everyone to think." He walked to a bar cart and poured 2 glasses of whiskey neat. He handed me one. "I should have known. Last night, when I saw you, something didn't add up. Isabella's story, the timing, the way you carried yourself, it was all wrong. But He paused, taking a long drink. "I took the coward's way out. I let myself believe the convenient lie." "Why?" I asked. "You knew me 15 years ago. You knew I was sharp as a blade. What made you think I'd lost my mind?" Marcus sank into his leather chair, suddenly looking every one of his 60-some years. "Because believing you were senile was easier than admitting I'd been helping your daughter commit fraud." The confession hung in the air between us. "Tell me everything," I said. And he did. For the next 30 minutes, Marcus Reeves detailed the entire scheme. How Isabella had come to him 3 years ago with a family concern about her grandmother's declining health. How she'd gradually escalated, bringing in Dr. Marsh with falsified medical evaluations. How they'd used those evaluations to get limited power of attorney, then expanded it. How Isabella had systematically liquidated assets, slowly at first, then with increasing desperation. "The gambling debts," Marcus said, running his hands through his silver hair. "They're massive, close to $8 million. She owes money to a syndicate that doesn't accept excuses. They gave her a deadline, this week. If she doesn't deliver the penthouse title and the remaining trust funds, they'll kill her," I finished. "Or worse. These people don't just kill. They destroy families, ruin lives, make examples." I set down my untouched whiskey. "How much is she meeting with them for today?" Marcus's eyes widened. "How did you know about the meeting?" "Answer the question, Marcus." "Noon. At Sullivan's office. He's the lawyer facilitating the deal with the syndicate. Isabella's trying to convince them to give her 48 more hours. She plans to have you committed tomorrow morning, sign the final transfers while you're in psychiatric hold, and deliver everything by end of business Friday." I glanced at the clock on Marcus's wall. 12:15. The meeting's already started. "Victoria, what are you planning?" I stood up, smoothing my borrowed suit. "I'm planning to introduce myself to my daughter's business partners." "Where's Sullivan's office?" 3 blocks from here. "But you can't just walk in there. These people are dangerous. They're not going to listen to some story about family drama. They'll see you as a threat to their money, and they'll eliminate you. Then I'll have to make sure I'm worth more to them alive than dead." I walked to the door, then paused and looked back at him. "Marcus, I need to know right now, are you with me, or are you going to try to stop me?" He stood slowly, straightening his tie. The haunted look in his eyes had been replaced by something else, determination, maybe even hope. I'm with you, he said. I've been a coward and a fool, but I draw the line at watching a good woman get destroyed by her own daughter. What do you need? I need you to call Sullivan. Tell him you're coming over for the meeting, some last-minute details to discuss. And tell him you're bringing a consultant. Don't mention my name. They'll recognize you. Maybe. But by the time they figure out who I am, I'll have already changed the game. 20 minutes later, Marcus and I stood outside Patrick Sullivan's office. Not a gleaming tower like Marcus's firm, but a converted warehouse in a grittier part of downtown. The kind of place where people conducted business they didn't want on official records. Last chance to reconsider, Marcus said as we approached the door. I stopped reconsidering 15 years ago when I chose to sacrifice everything for my family. Now I'm going to find out if that sacrifice meant anything at all. We entered. The interior was industrial chic, exposed brick, concrete floors, expensive modern furniture that tried too hard to look casual. A secretary with cold eyes looked us over. Mr. Reeves. You're late. They're waiting in the conference room. Apologies. Traffic. This is my associate, Ms. Chun. The secretary's eyes narrowed. I wasn't told about a +1. Last-minute addition. Trust me, Mr. Sullivan will want to hear what she has to say. The secretary picked up her phone, murmured something I couldn't hear, then hung up. Conference room B. End of the hall. And Mr. Reeves? They're not in a good mood. We walked down a narrow hallway, our footsteps echoing. Through the glass walls of conference room B, I could see them. Isabella, pacing like a caged animal, her earlier confidence replaced by barely concealed panic. Patrick Sullivan, a thin man with sharp features and sharper eyes. And 3 other people, 2 men and 1 woman, all dressed in expensive suits, all with the kind of cold, predatory calm that comes from a lifetime of violence. The syndicate. Marcus opened the door. Everyone turned to look at us. Isabella's face went through a series of expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, terror, and finally rage. What the hell is she doing here? Isabella shrieked, pointing at me. Marcus, what are you doing? She's not supposed to be. Sit down, Isabella, I said quietly, walking into the room with the confidence of someone who owned it. We need to have a family discussion, and these nice people deserve to know the truth about who they're doing business with. The woman from the syndicate, elegant, probably in her 50s, with eyes like a shark, smiled slowly. Well, this just got interesting. Everyone, please. Sit down. Let's hear what Ms. Chin, was it? Has to say. I sat at the head of the conference table, in the chair reserved for Sullivan. He started to protest, but the syndicate woman made a small gesture, and he fell silent. My name is Victoria Chun, I began, looking each person in the eye. I am the legal owner of the Chun Tower penthouse and the beneficial owner of the Chun Family Trust. My daughter has been representing to you that she has authority to transfer these assets. She does not. Isabella lurched to her feet. She's lying. She's senile. She's not competent to. Shut up, the syndicate woman said, her voice soft but absolute. Isabella immediately fell silent, sinking back into her chair. Continue, Ms. Chun. I pulled the USB drive from my pocket and slid it across the table. This drive contains the complete financial records of the Chun Family Trust, including documentation of every unauthorized transfer made over the past 3 years. It also contains medical records proving that the psychiatric evaluations used to obtain power of attorney were fraudulent. I turned to Isabella. Her face had gone white as paper. My daughter owes you $8 million, I continued. Money she stole from me and then gambled away. But here's what you need to understand. If you continue doing business with her, you'll get nothing. Because I'm taking back control of my assets as of right now. Every property, every account, every dollar. Isabella will be left with nothing but debt and criminal charges. The syndicate woman leaned back in her chair, studying me with new interest. And why are you telling us this, Ms. Chin? Seems like you'd want to just let us handle your daughter in our own way. We don't take kindly to people who welch on debts. Because, I said, meeting her cold gaze without flinching, I'm about to make you a better offer. Silence fell over the room. Even the air seemed to still. I'm listening, the syndicate woman said. $8 million is what my daughter owes you. I'll pay it. Today. In full. But in exchange, you leave my family alone. Forever. No retaliation, no revenge, no future business. You walk away clean, and we never see each other again. Mama, no. Isabella gasped, and for the first time, I heard real emotion in her voice. Not fear for herself, but shock that I would still protect her. You can't. I held up my hand, silencing her without even looking at her. But, I continued, there are conditions. First, Patrick Sullivan here cooperates fully with authorities regarding the fraudulent documents he prepared. Second, Dr. Marsh loses his medical license and never practices again. And third, I finally turned to look at my daughter. She was crying now, mascara running down her face, all her polish and confidence stripped away. Third, Isabella signs over any and all claims to the Chin family assets, submits to a financial audit, and enters a treatment program for her gambling addiction. She'll also serve community service. I'm thinking 5 years working at a homeless shelter should teach her some humility about sleeping on floors. The syndicate woman was quiet for a long moment, studying me with something that might have been respect. Finally, she smiled, a real smile, not the predatory one from before. You're one cold bitch, Miss Chin. I like that. We have a deal, on one additional condition. Which is, you give me the name of your investment advisor. Anyone who can turn construction work into enough capital to pay off an $8 million debt in cash clearly knows how to make money grow. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. Deal. The syndicate woman stood and extended her hand. I shook it. Her grip was firm, respectful. Pleasure doing business with you, Ms. Chun. And for what it's worth, your daughter's an idiot. She had a gold mine and treated it like garbage. She nodded to her associates, and they stood as one, preparing to leave. At the door, she paused and looked back at Isabella. You're very lucky your mother loves you more than you deserve. If it were up to me, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. Don't waste this chance. Then they were gone, leaving only the lawyer, Marcus, Isabella, and me in the silent conference room. Isabella sobbed into her hands, her whole body shaking. Why? She choked out. Why would you save me? After everything I did to you, to Grandma, why? I stood up and walked to her. I placed my hand on her shoulder, and she flinched as if I'd struck her. Because you're my daughter, I said simply. And because 15 years ago, I made a choice to sacrifice everything so you could have a better life. I'm not going to let your mistakes erase that sacrifice. But make no mistake, Isabella, I am deeply disappointed in you. The girl I left was kind and thoughtful. The woman I found is cruel and selfish. You have a lot of work to do to become someone I can be proud of again. I looked at Patrick Sullivan, who'd been sitting frozen throughout the entire exchange. You have 24 hours to turn over every document related to this fraud. After that, I'm filing criminal complaints. Am I clear? He nodded rapidly, sweat beading on his forehead. Crystal clear, Ms. Chun. Good. Marcus, let's go. We have paperwork to file. As we left the office, I heard Isabella crying behind us, great gulping sobs of shame and relief. I didn't look back. Some lessons are best learned alone. Outside, in the bright afternoon sun, Marcus let out a long breath. That was either the bravest or the most reckless thing I've ever witnessed. Sometimes they're the same thing, I replied. Now, I need you to do 2 more things for me. Name them. First, arrange for my mother to be examined by real doctors. Independent ones with no connection to Dr. Marsh. I want a full medical workup and detox from whatever poisons they've been feeding her. Consider it done. And the second, I smiled, thinking of Linda and her daughter, of all the silent victims of Isabella's cruelty. I need you to help me set up a foundation. We're going to turn the east wing of the Chin Tower into a crisis center for elderly people who've been abused or exploited by their families. No one else should have to sleep on a floor in their own home. Marcus's eyes softened. Victoria Chin, you really are something special. I'm honored to help. Good. Because we're just getting started. 3 weeks later, I stood on the rooftop terrace of the Chin Tower, my hands wrapped around a cup of jasmine tea, watching the sun rise over the city. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of the autumn flowers we'd just planted in the new rooftop garden. Behind me, the glass doors slid open. I turned to see my mother, dressed in a soft blue cardigan and comfortable slacks, walking toward me without trembling, without fear. Her eyes were clear now, truly clear, not the drug-induced haze I'd found her in. The doctor said it would take months for all the toxins to fully leave her system, but she was already stronger, more herself with each passing day. You're up early, she said, settling into the chair beside mine. Old habit. In the desert, you learn to appreciate sunrises. They remind you that no matter how dark the night was, morning always comes. She took my hand, squeezing it gently. Thank you, Victoria, for coming back, for fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself. You did fight, Mama. You left me clues, hid evidence, survived 3 years of torture. You're the strongest person I know. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the city wake up below us. Construction cranes dotted the skyline. The city was always building, always growing. I understood that drive now. After destruction, you rebuild. After darkness, you create light. How is she? My mother asked quietly. She didn't need to say the name. We both knew who she meant. Struggling. The treatment program is intense, and the community service is humbling her in ways she never expected. But I paused, considering my words carefully. I see glimpses of the girl I left behind. Small moments of genuine remorse, of self-awareness. It's going to take time, maybe years, but I think she might find her way back. Do you think you'll ever forgive her? I thought about that. I don't know. Forgiveness isn't something you can force or rush. But I can give her the chance to become someone worth forgiving. That's all any parent can do. The door opened again. Linda appeared, carrying a tray with fresh pastries and fruit. She'd gained weight in the past few weeks, the healthy kind, from not living in constant fear. Her daughter had been quietly enrolled in a treatment program, her record cleared through Marcus's connections. Morning, ladies. Breakfast is ready whenever you are. And Mrs. Chun, the architect, is coming at 9 to discuss the renovations for the crisis center. Thank you, Linda. We'll be down in a few minutes. After Linda left, my mother turned to me with curiosity. You've been taking a lot of meetings. What else are you planning? I smiled. Remember how I always said I wanted to do something meaningful with the money I made? Not just accumulate it, but use it to change things. She nodded. I'm starting 3 initiatives. The first is the crisis center here. Safe housing and legal support for elderly people being exploited by their families. The second is a scholarship fund for women in construction and engineering. I spent 15 years being one of the only women on those sites. It's time to change that. And the third, I'm buying the construction company I worked for in Nevada. The owner's retiring, and he offered me first rights. I'm going to turn it into a worker-owned cooperative, profit sharing, better safety standards, fair wages. No more treating people like disposable machines. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Your father would have been so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. We sat together as the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Below us, the city hummed with life, millions of people starting their days, facing their own battles, carrying their own burdens. Somewhere in that vast cityscape, Isabella was mopping floors at a homeless shelter, learning the dignity of honest work. Dr. Marsh was facing medical board hearings, his career in ruins. Patrick Sullivan was cooperating with prosecutors, trying to salvage something from the wreckage of his choices. And in the Chun Tower's East Wing, construction workers were transforming luxury apartments into safe havens. Places where people could heal, could remember that they mattered, that they deserved dignity and respect. The intercom buzzed. Linda's voice came through. Mrs. Chun? Judge Wilson is here. He says he has news about the criminal proceedings. I stood up, brushing off my slacks. Send him up to my office. I'll be right there. My mother stood too, but I placed a hand on her shoulder. You rest, Mama. Enjoy the garden. I'll handle this. Victoria, she called as I reached the door. What you did, paying Isabella's debts, giving her a chance instead of letting those people destroy her, that wasn't weakness. That was strength. I need you to know that. I know, Mama. But strength isn't just about protecting the people you love. It's also about holding them accountable. Isabella's getting a second chance, but she's earning every bit of it. I met Judge Wilson in my office, a space I'd reclaimed and redesigned. Gone were Isabella's pretentious modern pieces. In their place, I'd hung photographs from my years in the desert. Construction workers at sunset, the skeletal frames of buildings rising against vast skies, my own weathered face smiling after a hard day's work. Judge Wilson was a stern man in his 60s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He'd been assigned to oversee Isabella's case after the investigation began. Mrs. Chun, he said, shaking my hand firmly. I wanted to update you personally. Dr. Raymond Marsh has had his medical license permanently revoked. He's also facing criminal charges for fraud and reckless endangerment. Patrick Sullivan has been disbarred and is cooperating fully with authorities. We've uncovered similar schemes involving at least 6 other families. And Isabella? Given her cooperation, the restitution you've made to victims of the lawyer's other schemes, and her enrollment in treatment, the DA is offering a plea deal. 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, mandatory addiction counseling, and permanent restriction from accessing any accounts in your name or your mother's. She'll have a criminal record, but she'll avoid jail time. I nodded slowly. That seems fair. Mrs. Chun, if I may speak frankly, what your daughter did to you and your mother is one of the most egregious cases of elder abuse I've encountered in 30 years on the bench. You would be well within your rights to push for maximum penalties. I know, but Judge, I spent 15 years in the desert learning that the harshest environment doesn't always produce the strongest person. Sometimes it just produces bitterness and cruelty. I don't want Isabella to be broken. I want her to be rebuilt properly this time. Prison would just teach her to be a better criminal. This way, she has to face what she's done every single day, while still having the possibility of redemption. Judge Wilson studied me for a long moment, then nodded. You're a remarkable woman, Mrs. Chun. The city is lucky to have you back. After he left, I stood at the window, looking out over the skyline. My reflection stared back at me. A woman with silver hair and weathered skin, wearing an expensive suit but still carrying the strength of someone who'd spent years breaking rocks and pouring foundations. I thought about the taxi driver from that first day, who'd looked at me and seen only a tired old woman in the wrong place. I wondered what he'd think if he saw me now. But it didn't matter. I wasn't doing this for recognition or validation. I was doing it because someone had to stand up and say, no. This ends here. The exploitation, the cruelty, the treating of human beings as disposable, it all ends here. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. First resident arrives at the crisis center tomorrow. 73-year-old woman whose son stole her pension. She's scared but hopeful. You're changing lives, Victoria. I smiled, texting back. We're changing lives. This was never just about me. 6 months later, I sat in the community room of the Chun Tower Crisis Center, surrounded by 12 elderly men and women who'd found refuge there. We met every Thursday evening for what we called Story Circle, a chance for residents to share their experiences, their pain, their hope. Tonight, a woman named Dorothy was speaking. She was 76, had been locked in a basement by her grandson who'd stolen her Social Security checks. Linda had found her through a police report and brought her to us. I never thought I'd feel safe again, Dorothy said, her voice shaking but strong. I thought I was going to die in that basement. But then Linda found me, and Victoria gave me a place where people see me as a person, not a burden. You gave me back my dignity. Around the circle, others nodded. There was James, 82, whose daughter had drained his retirement account. Maria, 70, who'd been emotionally abused by her son-in-law. Robert, 79, who'd been threatened with homelessness if he didn't sign over his house. Each of them had a story. Each of them had survived. And now, each of them was thriving. Victoria, James spoke up, you never told us your story. We've all shared ours. It's your turn. I hesitated. I'd kept my own experience private, not wanting to make this about me. But looking around the circle, I saw the expectation, the curiosity, the solidarity in their eyes. So I told them. I told them about coming home after 15 years to find my mother on the floor, about my daughter's cruelty, about the drugs and the theft and the betrayal. I told them about the fear, the rage, the cold determination to make things right. When I finished, the room was silent. Then Dorothy reached over and took my hand. Thank you, she said simply. Thank you for not letting your pain make you bitter. Thank you for turning it into something beautiful. 1 year after my return, I stood in the same spot where I'd first entered the penthouse. That threshold where I'd seen my mother curled on the floor like a discarded rag. Now, a beautiful woven mat lay there, handmade by one of the crisis center residents. It read, "Everyone who enters here is valued, respected, and safe." The penthouse had been transformed. Half of it now served as administrative offices for the Victoria Chun Foundation. The other half was my and my mother's home. Comfortable, warm, filled with photographs and plants and the sound of laughter. My mother was in the kitchen, teaching 3 of the crisis center residents her recipe for dumplings. Their voices drifted through the space, mixing with the scent of ginger and green onions. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Isabella standing there, thinner than before, her expensive clothes replaced with simple jeans and a sweatshirt. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore no makeup. She looked younger somehow, more like the daughter I'd left behind. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly. I finished my shift at the shelter. I brought you this. She handed me a piece of paper. It was a hand-drawn card, crude but heartfelt. On the front, she'd drawn a phoenix rising from flames. Inside, in shaky handwriting, I'm sorry. I'm trying. Thank you for not giving up on me. I felt my throat tighten. Come in. Grandma's making dumplings. You can help. Surprise flashed across her face. Really? You'd let me. You're still my daughter, Isabella. That never changed. What changed is that now you have to earn back the trust you destroyed. One dumpling at a time, if that's what it takes. She followed me inside, and I saw her stop at the threshold, reading the mat. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm valued, she whispered. You're valued, I confirmed. But value and trust are different things. Value is inherent. You have it because you're human. Trust has to be earned, and you have a long way to go. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I know. I'm working on it. Every day. In the kitchen, my mother looked up as we entered. She studied Isabella for a long moment, then handed her an apron. Wash your hands. The dough needs rolling. It was a small gesture, but it was a beginning. That evening, after everyone had left and the penthouse was quiet, I returned to the rooftop terrace. The city lights sparkled below like earthbound stars, and I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the desperate woman sleeping in a desert trailer, to the silent figure watching her mother suffer, to the woman I was now. Scarred but stronger, disappointed but not broken, hurt but still capable of love. I learned something in that year of fighting for my family. The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire, but it's the cooling process that determines whether it becomes a weapon or a tool for building. I chose to build. If you're facing your own darkness right now, whether it's family betrayal, exploitation, or just the weight of feeling unseen and unvalued, I want you to know this. You are not alone. Your story matters. Your pain is real, but it doesn't define your future. You have the power to rise from the ashes, just like I did. Sometimes the people we sacrifice everything for turn out to be our greatest disappointments. But that doesn't mean the sacrifice was wasted. It means we get to choose what comes next. We get to decide whether bitterness or wisdom grows from our suffering. I chose wisdom. I chose to build something beautiful from something broken. And every day I help others do the same. What will you choose? I'm so glad you stayed with me through this entire journey. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own relationships, your own sacrifices, your own second chances, then please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Write in the comments. What would you do if you came home after years of sacrifice to find everything you'd given had been betrayed? And what city are you watching from right now? I love knowing where all of you wonderful souls are tuning in from around the world. If you want to support the work I do, sharing these real, raw, meaningful stories every single day, you can send a small donation. It helps me keep bringing you these tales of resilience, redemption, and the unbreakable human spirit. And remember, no matter how dark your night has been, morning always comes. The question is, what will you build in that new light? 2 of my most popular stories are appearing on your screen right now. Choose your next journey, and let's continue this conversation about what it means to be human, to suffer, to survive, and ultimately to thrive. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for believing that even broken things can be made beautiful again. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never forget your worth.